Hey everyone, so I'll be starting my garage build over the next few weeks, so I just want to do a video starting with a baseline, where I'm starting from, and just to give some considerations as well for other people who may be doing their own either house builds or garage builds. The garage is just a standard 2-car garage. It's about 23 by 23, and the ceiling is just under 11 feet. It's about 10 feet 8 inches or so. So it's a good sized 2-car garage, especially one that's attached to a house. You can comfortably get 2 cars in and out without having to worry about hitting the sides or hitting the car next to it when you open your door. I went with one single door. I like that a little bit better. It's a lot easier, especially if you're doing a lot of projects with vehicles. You can easily put the car right in the middle of the garage, not have to worry about hitting the center post if you want to put the car right in the middle, or you don't have to worry about hitting the center post when you're backing out. The walls are all insulated, so I actually did spray foam insulation in the wall, so even though the garage itself is not directly heated from the house, it usually does stay considerably warmer in here than it does outside, just from the radiant heat coming off the house. So you should definitely insulate your garage, especially if you're going to be working in there. It's always a good idea. It makes a tremendous difference if it's really cold outside and you want to go work in the garage. Obviously, ceiling height is a big deal depending on the way the garage is set up relative to the house. Obviously, the bigger the ceiling you have, usually the better, depending, especially if you want to possibly put a lift in there, or if you want to put taller vehicles in. Lighting is also another good consideration. I did all LED lights in here. I plan on working in here a lot, and the little bit of extra money of the cost of LEDs well justifies it. The power usage is extremely low. You can run them all day, and they really don't use much electricity. The floors are just your standard concrete floor, nothing special. It's not coated right now. Standard 4-inch concrete, that's usually the minimums that you want to have in a garage for vehicle weight. One of the biggest considerations I think that a lot of people overlook is the actual physical door itself and the related hardware to it. There's 4 main considerations you want to look at on a door: the size, the material it's made out of, the track, and the opener itself. We'll start off with the size of the door. A lot of houses, especially older ones that have one large door, typically they were 16 by 7, 16 feet wide, 7 feet tall, which is a little bit on the narrow side. You kind of have to be careful with a door that size when you're going in and out, that you don't hit the car next to you or the side of the garage coming out. This is the newer standard. This is 18 by 8, so it's 18 feet wide and it's 8 feet tall. So by going with that, it's much safer and more comfortable going in and out. You really don't have to be as cautious. You still should be, but you're not really coming as close as you used to, having an extra foot on each side. And the 8-foot door means pretty much anything could fit in here. I mean, lifted trucks. There's really not too many vehicles that are 8 feet tall as far as passenger vehicles or pickup trucks or SUVs. So, I mean, I can comfortably fit even very, very tall vehicles in here. The only difference, or the only consideration at that point is the length at that point if we get into really, really long vehicles. The next consideration is the materials it's made out of. Now, obviously, you can have it made out of a lot of things: wood, aluminum, steel. Steel is by far the most common, but another good consideration is the actual insulation of the door itself. Typically, with garage doors, there's 3 types of insulation. There's no insulation at all, where it's just stamped steel and there's nothing there to help reinforce it at all or give it no insulation value. The next is polystyrene, basically what foam cups are made out of, like foam coffee cups. They do add a considerable amount of insulation value. It's usually pretty good. It also helps to stiffen the door and make it a lot stronger. But what this door is, this is called polyurethane. This is basically spray foam inside the door. It not only makes it gives it a very good R value for the insulation value, but it also makes the door very strong. The door itself is almost 2 inches thick because of that foam insulation, and by having the door that thick, it makes it very solid and very rigid. So even when the wind's blowing really hard, the door doesn't bow or flex at all. It stays very solid, which is especially important when you have one large door like this. So the combination of the insulation in the house, on the house, and the insulation on the door, it stays very well tempered here. Even when it's extremely cold outside, it usually never ever gets below freezing in here. When it's even negatives outside, so the insulation makes a tremendous difference. The next thing to take into consideration is the track itself. Most garage doors, depending on the ceiling height, can be the main limitation, but when you have a much taller ceiling like this, you really want to go with a track that will ride all the way up and get as close to the ceiling as you possibly can. It gives it not only it makes it feel bigger because it sort of is, but it also gives you a lot more headroom if you want to do a lot of overhead items as well. So the door also doesn't have to go back as far because it rides up before it comes back. and it gives it a much more open feel now. So if you want to get into things like lifts, you have a lot more headroom available right off the bat, as opposed to doing the older style where it comes back as soon as it goes above the actual threshold itself. And the last consideration is the opener. A lot of newer style companies offer what they call these jack shaft openers. Basically, you have the opener on the side of the door instead of having it in the middle. So now you don't have the opener in the middle. There's a lot more headroom available, again, if you want to get into lifts or depending on what you want to do in the garage. But now it's out of the way. It's a much more clean, open feel. It's extremely quiet. And let me just cycle the door, and I'll show you what it looks like. So the opener is extremely quiet. Unfortunately, there's a little echo in here with nothing in here, but you have the spring at the top, so it's much safer. You don't have the springs along the side, because every once in a while when those springs let go, you got to be very careful. Those things are very powerful. So the spring's basically on the top. It's tucked up in the corner now. The opener's in the corner, and now you have a much more open area. It gives it a much larger feel in here. You don't have, and from a cosmetic standpoint, it just looks a lot better. I painted a lot of the hardware in here, so it blends in very well, and you can see the track better, how close the track actually gets to the ceiling itself. So the door stays up nice and high. It lets a lot more light in, so I definitely like this setup a lot better. It gives it a much bigger feel in here. I'll go ahead, I'll cycle it up again. So the only real issue I have is it covers some of the lights when the door's all the way up, which during the day is not really a big deal. So at night I'll usually leave it down if I'm working here just to get a little bit extra light. But that's sort of the baseline of what I'm starting off with. It's just basically one big open garage, and I just wanted to have it very well insulated and make it sort of as efficient as possible, both with the insulation and the lighting. Also, one thing to do if you're doing a garage build is you want to make sure you have plenty of outlets. Don't get cheap on the outlets. Make sure you're running 220s, 110s. Make sure you have plenty of outlets, because it's always more difficult to go back in the end. I'm already starting to use up quite a few of my outlets as it is. So if I start to get into higher demand stuff, I may have to eventually run a little bit more, but you definitely want to make sure you have a sufficient amount. So like I said, over the next couple of weeks, I'll be doing a lot more work in here. I have a lot of stuff on order. I have a couple contractors coming over to start doing work in here, but I just want to cover a baseline of what I'm starting with, and also to give people some considerations whether or not you're doing a house build like I did, or you're building maybe a second garage next to the house. These are just a lot of things that you want to take in consideration before you start construction, because it's really hard to go back and kind of change this stuff afterwards. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.